Hi everyone, Mark Freeman here, and welcome to the Graybeard Wisdom Podcast, where experience meets innovation, and wisdom comes with a few miles on the soles, and maybe a few in the soul. Today's guest is a real deal, a former marathon runner who understands endurance like few do, a Marine air traffic controller who stayed cool under pressure. And now he's taking that same grit and vision into the college and university world, championing sustainability and shaking up campus operations in a way that makes a real difference. Kris Klinger isn't just talking about change, he's making it happen. So sit back, grab your coffee, or maybe lace up your running shoes, and get ready for some real talk with a guy who knows how to go the distance. Let's get to it. Hi everyone, Mark Freeman here from the Day One Hospitality Consulting Graybeard Wisdom Podcast. Boy, what a long intro that is. But anyway, today we have Kris Klinger from Boston University, and Kris, it's really great to have you, and I hope it's a great conversation. We'll definitely get into some interesting stuff, I'm sure. One of the first questions that I ask is, and I don't know if you might know my background, but I was at LinkedIn for a little while, and one of the things that we did when we went around the room and introduced ourselves was say something that's not on your LinkedIn profile. So maybe let's start out with that. What's something that would be interesting to our audience that maybe is not on your LinkedIn profile?
Wow, interesting. There's a lot. I mean, it's interesting because there's a lot on the LinkedIn profile, which I think LinkedIn has done a nice job of capturing, the majority of what we are, at least, as far as our work lives go. I would think,
And it doesn't have to be related to work life. It can
yeah,
be, hobbies or whatever.
yeah. I mean, I enjoyed running and doing triathlons. That wouldn't really have been on there.
That's
Trying to
cool.
think, parents are German immigrants. It's a first generation American. I've got dual citizenship. So I guess those are a couple little
Yeah.
nuggets to
Have
share.
you ever done a marathon?
Oh yeah, I've done dozens of marathons. But I don't have the gray beard to show my age. But I have the sore knees and other things to show my age. So I've stopped running for the most part. It's a little too painful.
Did you ever get into Boston?
I
I
did. I qualified a handful of times, and I
Wow.
ended up not running it any of the times I qualified at other races that I was looking forward to and that I'd been planning for. So I never ended up running it. And now I live in Boston, and I watch it every year, having wished that I had run it one time. And every once in a while, I think it'd be great just to run part of it. But we'll see. There's a group. I was talking to a gentleman earlier today from Baylor, one of my colleagues that works at Baylor University, and he was sharing with me that the night before the marathon, the entire course is shut down. And so what they do is they allow cyclists to ride from the starting line to Boston, and they can even do it back and forth with a little pancake breakfast. They do that at midnight, the night before the race. So but I'm not in town this Sunday night, so I won't be able to take advantage of that either. But that would be fun.
Yeah, that sounds like really fun. You and I should have an offline conversation about running because I ran one marathon and one was enough. And as I was training, I was dreaming of Boston, but I wasn't obviously I didn't qualify for that. So, but yeah, I did a lot of crazy other things with the running, and you're right, the knees don't handle that as I grow a gray beard, right? So.
Yeah. Well, it's over the years, and I'm not a small guy, so that didn't help either.
Yeah, cool. Well, maybe tell us a little bit about your career and kind of where you've been maybe over the last few years and how you kind of got into this world.
Yeah, I know. Mark, it's been an interesting journey, and I call a lot of things journeys, but this has definitely been one of those journeys that I never would have expected myself to be where I'm at, and doing the things that I do. Um, I mean, over the years, like I said, grew up, the son of immigrants. I ended up um, going to high school. We moved from Southern California to Northern California. I enjoyed high school. That's where I started running and cross country and track. So loved that. And I also swam. So I'm a big advocate of all those exercises and at sports because you can keep doing those after you graduate from high school or college. Um, so I did that. And then I ended up working at McDonald's well, right out of high school when I was going to junior college, and I did that for almost a year, and I enjoyed it. And I initially started on the grill, then I did drive-through too, and cashiering a bit, and then I was starting to go into the management training program. But I didn't want to stay in the town that I was in, and I ended up uh, signing up or joining the Marines so that I could go get the GI Bill and pay for college. So I ended up joining the Marines. I was an air traffic controller in the Marines, and then and actually I took a couple classes when I was in the Marines, and then really. Enjoyed that, but my goal was to get out of the Marines and then to go to college. So I ended up while I was in the Marines, I was an air traffic controller, which is a great job to have in the Marines because the
Yeah.
FAA regulates your hours, not the Marines. Because you got to be safe and land the airplanes and do all the good stuff the way you're supposed to do it and keep people safe and alive. And so had a I got a part-time job bussing tables at a restaurant. I was stationed at El Toro, Southern California, so I got a part-time job as a busboy that ended up transitioning to a waiter job, and enjoyed that. I enjoyed the hospitality field. It was obviously different than my McDonald's experience, but it was still the hospitality space. And so then when I got out of the Marines, and I was going to Santa Monica City College for a year before I transferred to USC for the last 2 years. I was working for the gentleman that actually was the GM of the hotel that I worked at. He had picked up a position at another hotel as a GM in Marina Del Rey, and so he hired me as to help him, and I ended up managing there. I was the property manager for the food and beverage side, and also did accounts payable, receivable, and payroll. So sort of learned a lot in a short amount of time, and I really enjoyed it. And then I was actually offered another job while I was there, but I really, like I said, wanted to go to the USC, so I ended up doing that. And while I was at USC, I bartended for the majority of the time there. Then got out of USC, and my undergrad degrees were international relations and German, and so I went to go take the State Department test, and I realized that this is not what I wanted to do, and so I ended up going into hospitality and worked at the Sheraton for a year. Then I joined California Pizza Kitchen, and I was with them for 10 years, and they moved me around. I raised my hand quite a bit, and they moved me from LA to Dallas to Boston to Long Island to Walnut Creek, and then to Denver, where I left them after 10 years of opening a ton of stores and regions, and having a lot of fun working both front and back of house, eventually leaving as a partner at the actually regional in Colorado, but I was a partner in Walnut Creek. And then went into contract food service, and there's a group, they're no longer around, but it was Food Brand. It was a spinoff of HMS Host. And
Okay.
so we ran food courts in malls and in airports. And so I was with them for a couple of years, and then ended up joining Compass Group, and worked for them for 2.5, 3 years, initially in B&I, and then I transitioned to account retention, and then did that for a little while. And then my alma mater, USC, came calling, and they were looking for a director of hospitality And so I'm like, I'd love to talk to you about it, and ended up working out. And so I was there for almost a dozen years and transitioned and moved up over time and oversaw housing as well as some other areas of business for USC. And then ended up transitioning during the pandemic. Um, I decided that it was time for a change. And one of the reasons I did was when I graduated from USC in 1992, it was a year of the Rodney King uprising.
Oh, okay.
Fast forward to 2020, and we have the George Floyd stuff going on. Same neighborhood, same stuff, a lot of
Okay.
looting, rioting, protesting, burning, and all of that. And I had enough of LA. So I'm like, all right, so I'm gonna figure out what I'm gonna do next. And fortunately, Syracuse University had reached out to me for a while prior to that, and then I ended up taking them a little more seriously, and we ended up making a deal, and I ended up moving there July of 2020, so
Oh,
right during the
yeah.
pandemic. But I'll tell you what, it was probably an amazing opportunity. It was an amazing opportunity because I was able to go there and really make a difference because USC was shut down for the most part. California state shut down a lot of things. I mean, there were certain things going on, but you at Syracuse, we were full on. We had obviously had reduced numbers, but so it was a lot of fun to experience and go in there and take on all of those different nuances. And so I was the associate vice president, then promoted senior associate vice president of auxiliary services when I was there for 2.5 or so years. And then I was actually planning on moving back to California, and just Syracuse was nice, but it wasn't the right fit for me. And so then I was looking at maybe moving back to California. My parents are getting older, and I want to be there for them. And I was almost ready to take a job, and then BU recruiter reached out, and so we moved along pretty quickly, and then the position presented itself, and so I'm here, and I've been here for a couple of years now, and grateful for the opportunity. I really, appreciate Boston, the city, and what we've got going on, and just the uniqueness of the campus, and then just able to apply all the different things I've learned over the years here, and then also, really support the team in a meaningful way.
Oh, that's cool. And it's interesting because some of the same similarities that I had in my career, it's like I started a job, well, I ended a job and started the job in the middle of COVID, right? And that was, an interesting transition. And especially when I was a remote worker. So I was living in Seattle and commuting to the South Bay for that. So that was kind of interesting. And then same thing when I, kind of I got a business degree, but really didn't know what I was going to do in college. And all of a sudden I'd worked in restaurants and, all that along the way. And it's like, well, I know food, and I joined a company called Saga Food Service and back in the day, and it was fantastic. And again, my whole career went crazy, and because I kept, just like you, I kept raising my hand. So I think we moved 13 times in the first 11 years that I was with the company. It's just like we were constantly moving, but I saw that as excitement and a real kind of opportunity to build my career. So that's cool. That's quite a journey for sure.
Not over yet.
Yeah, and that's where I'm at too. I've tried to retire, at least 3 times, and I love this industry, and the people, all of that. So it's kind of, I call it I'm in my mid career right now, and I don't see an end to it. So it's kind of cool, but. Well, so to switch gears a little bit, we're on our explosions meeting coming up in a week or so. We're going to be talking about sustainability and this Agora group that's kind of been going. And I guess maybe tell me a little bit about how you got engaged with that, and and the sustainability overall and that sort of thing. Because similar again, I was deep into sustainability when I was at Microsoft, and we kind of did a lot of crazy things with sustainability and trying to feed the world and save the world and all that sort of thing. But what's your story around this group and your kind of your relationship with sustainability?
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. I mean, sustainability is one of those words that everybody likes to use, and they try to hang their hats on, or and initiatives are all sustainable, but I mean, people are not fully, I think, embracing what it really does mean and what it is. And Jim Green, who's a friend, and I've worked with him over the years with different organizations and group, helped start up Agora, and he reached out and asked if I would be interested in joining the group, and I happily jumped in and said, yes, because one is Jim's just an amazing human being,
Yeah.
and he's really put a lot of time and energy into Agora, and really has helped us get to where we are now. And we had our board meeting the other day, and just the amount of work and progress that's been made, it's just astounding. And really, our goal is to be a resource for folks, and help bring folks together, provide them with resources, and make a difference, in the world, um, and in all the different areas too that we're supporting. Um, so we're really excited about. I mean, at BU we've been very focused on sustainability. I mean, and I mentioned earlier that I was at USC and then Syracuse, and they're also very sustainability focused. Particularly USC was when I was there, and I know they still are. Where we were negotiating with our um, uh, bottler, the beverage company, in regards to getting more sustainable packaging on campus and looking for other ways to reduce or eliminate single-use plastic and other things like that. And it was an initiative to where right before I left, USC announced that they were going to remove or eliminate all single-use plastic. I think by last year, if I remember correctly, or at least this year.
Yeah.
And a lot of schools have goals like that, and that the challenge is helping others help you or help us get there. And that's really where I think Agora can step in and try to pool the resources, bring folks together, and not only operators and manufacturers and so on, so that everybody is on the same page and understanding what success really looks like. And I mean, I'll give you an example. We're working on our pouring rights at Boston University, and we met with the two. There's two groups, right?
Yeah.
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 Um, and they're trying, and they speak sustainability, but the practice really isn't there, to the level it could or should be. But it's such a big organization, and then to move and change, it really requires some time. And I think we're moving. They're moving as quickly as they can. It seems like, but the bigger concern or issue is the waste stream, as an example. And you talk about we've got recyclable materials and all that, but then it just ends up in the same receptacle in the same place that the other stuff does. And so it's looking at all the different components, and trying to work together to help solve some of these things. And whether it's the haulers or the manufacturers, and putting it in less packaging, and so on, really reducing that carbon footprint, reducing the waste, and finding ways to really get our I have the fortunate opportunity to educate, and influence, future leaders of this world, right? And the CNU space in particular is really the place that you want to do that and want to be able to influence those folks. And so we spend time trying to help them help us, and then allowing them to help us as well. They're great. And so we're always looking for ways that we can improve, sustainability efforts. And one of the things that we've done recently is choose to reuse program, and we piloted at the same time as Zia did at the Ohio State, and he piloted it in residential where students could use a reusable takeout container to take food out of the dining halls. We don't allow students to take food out of the dining halls, so we created the program where the reusable container is used for to go in the retail spaces. And actually, well, it's funny because I happen to have one right here. Um,
Uh-huh.
but this is what the food comes in, and you have a certain amount of days, I think 5 days after you eat your food to return the container, or you get charged for the container. If you don't order it on the container, you have two other options. Or in this container, you can order it on a plate, which a lot of folks do, or you can order it in a compostable container
Uh-huh.
that costs you $2. So
Uh-huh.
we have
And you don't get it
discounted.
back, right? I mean,
Correct, yeah.
right. Yeah. Okay.
So this if you don't bring this back, it costs you $5. Um, so most people bring it back, and there's a grace period and so on. But so I mean, we're looking at different ways to educate folks, and the students have been really behind this one in particular, and we're finding other traction, and we've implemented other locations to where we're even doing it with coffee cups in some of our coffee concepts. So. But I mean, that's just an example of some of the things that we're trying to do. But there's so many other things where we're trying to track waste ahead of time with AI and production and so on. So there's a lot of fun things go out there, Mark.
Yeah, totally, totally understand it. And again, our paths crossed a little bit when I was at Microsoft. We were doing a lot with single-use plastic and that sort of thing. And by the time I got to LinkedIn, we were actually able to do that on a global scale. We just didn't allow it, sort of thing. And it gets into purchasing and can what do you do and all, and you get into those reusables and the kind of the interesting thing about reusables is that market seems to be advancing to a point where you can track the container now and or people is starting to develop that technology, and like you say, AI is coming in from a food waste standpoint. It's just amazing what's going on with technology, and I kind of like to follow that, as you might guess, and it's crazy kind of how that all goes. One of the things that I did, like you said, sustainability is a big word, and one of the things that I didn't know where to start, and I think I saw somewhere were you associated with the Green Restaurant Association
Yeah,
and getting some of the things that they did, and I don't want to do a promo for them, but they helped us a lot in getting to, I think we most, well, eventually all of our cafes went to 4-star, but there was this process, and it was helpful to be able to sell that to decision makers because now there was a purpose behind it, and we were going to support the company in this case. But yeah, tell me your experience maybe with the Green Restaurant Association. Did you have a similar experience?
yeah, Mark. We brought the Green Restaurant, or we certified Green Restaurant Association concepts or restaurants when I was at USC. Really, our goal was to certify all the major, restaurants or spaces that we could. And so we started with some of the dining halls, and then the restaurants. A few of the retail concepts we were unable to do that with. But we certified the majority of all of our dining halls, and then the majority of our retail spaces, including the restaurants that we had. And then we were on track. We began that at Syracuse when I was there as well to start the certification process
Yeah,
there. We have not done that here, but it's a little different in Boston and Massachusetts. But yeah, we had a lot of success doing that, and it really, I mean, it does a couple things. It really makes everybody look at what we're doing and how we're doing it behind the scenes in regards to how we're purchasing and so on, and to be a lot more thoughtful about what you're doing. Um, but it's also a credential that matters, and folks, appreciate credentials and, all the different, sustainability credentials out there, they seem to be gaining a lot of weight and momentum. And,
yeah,
obviously that is one of them. And we really, appreciated starting that process and going through it. And like I said, we learned a lot along the way, and I'm glad we did it. And the university appreciated it too.
Well, yeah, and again, the quandary from being in BNI is that you're teaching those, my new customers, if you will, in 3 or 4, they're going to be my customers in 3 or 4 years, and so they're setting it up, and you're, teaching them and providing them with information that they're expecting in the workplace when they get there, and so I've always had been, I spent 26 years in college universities with Saga, and then I switched to BNI, and I had a good career there, but it was kind of fun to be able to say, okay, the K-12 get to, kind of start them, then you gotta deal with them in college, and then I got to deal with them in the workplace, right? So it's kind of an interesting thing. So Boston University is a well-respected program that you're running there, and good job with that. How do you, and I had this problem at Microsoft, is that when you're out leading the charge, there isn't anybody to go to say, hey, wait a minute, what about that? Or what about this? And so how do you get inspired to be on the cutting edge, if you will, most of the time? And how do you, you talked about students, and they're really good about bringing stuff to you. It doesn't always resonate. I mean, back when I was seeing you, the canned tuna was a big thing, right? We couldn't have, oh my God, all that stuff. But what is it? What inspires you, or how do you get your new ideas?
It's interesting. We've got I look at it. I find a number of different avenues to be inspired by in regards to the sustainability efforts. Our food provider is Aramark, and so they've got their corporate group and corporate programs that they're always drawing on and looking at and looking into. We've got a sustainability action plan and a sustainability group here at BU that we've got a number of different initiatives and things that we're focused on, and the students come to us with ideas as you mentioned earlier and suggestions, and whether it's a technology or an app or a food product or who knows what it is that they're coming up with. They pull it out of their back pocket with their business plan, and they think, hey, this guy's going to go with me, and but so those are some of the ways, publications and conferences, seeing what other industries are doing, that associating where you find something that's working somewhere else and seeing how it'll fit in your space. We do
Yeah.
that, as well. So we're always trying to see what's out there and what's available. Yeah, and I think we're quick to try things, right? And that's where I think in higher ed, we have that ability. We've got a really good partner on our campus that really works well with us in regards to trying to find those opportunities to leverage, I mean, either technologies or whatever it is to improve the overall experience of our students. But sustainability efforts is definitely one of those things. And I have an amazing sustainability group here, whether it's from the BU side or the Airmark side, that really does a nice job sharing different ideas and suggestions with us. Um, and I think the other thing, Mark, is everybody sees it as it's the right thing to do. It's not trendy, it's not hip, it's not cool. It's just what you should be doing and what you need to be
Yeah.
doing. And so it's easy to get people behind it. And even when it requires a bit of funding, it's easier to do that than it would be on something else that may not be as impactful and as important as sustainability, is.
Well, yeah, and I guess again, success breeds success, is that when you try those things and they are successful, it helps when you want to sell it up your management chain to say, hey, I'm building trust with you, kind of thing, and the students, it's built on a solid platform and that whole thing, right? So that you have the ability to then grow it, hopefully, into the stratosphere, right?
Oh yeah.
That's cool. And then I could talk forever about sustainability because I was really into it. But you mentioned food waste, and that's a big thing now, and AI. And there's some companies out there that are opening up the doors to being able to track that. But maybe tell me a little bit about what you're doing with food waste and how Airmark is helping with that, but also your internal sustainability group is, and again, you talked about it a little bit with, you know, when you throw something away, it doesn't always go in the right barrel, right? And we got to a point where we were just sorting everything at the end because we were sending it to a compost facility and they wouldn't accept it unless it was clean, right? And so I'm guessing you bumped into some things like that as well, right?
Yeah, I mean it's interesting, Mark. We're working hard to work with our hauler on that so that we can separate things correctly and accordingly, and that it goes to where it needs to go. Easier said than done, obviously.
Yeah.
And so we're going to continue to work with them and with our students. There's different sorting mechanisms and but I mean I stand back sometimes and I watch and our students just throw whatever they want in whatever container they feel like throwing it. And sometimes though we make it more confusing than it needs to be too. Like, and that's the part where we've got to make it a little bit simpler, and because nobody has time to look at a list of 12 different rules per container in regards to what goes here and what doesn't go in here. They're just going to throw it in there. So we've got to make it simpler, and that's the part that I think we're really struggling on. And it's not there yet. And on top of it, different colors and different shapes and all this. I mean, let's figure out a way so that it's standardized, so that the blue means something, right, or the green means something, and the shape means something all across the board as opposed to different in different cities or states or sectors or whatever the case may be. And I think that's a piece that really we're struggling with and missing. Like I said, I've seen it all at all three institutions.
Well, yeah, and again, where my mind goes is that as technology advances, you can take, and you said it, you can take from somewhere else and apply it to what you're trying to do. And the example I'm thinking about, and Aramark is big into Mastion and the readers
Yep.
with cameras, right? And so my thought was, well, why can't you do something where they throw away their product and have, it's the same picture.
Yeah.
It's just empty instead of full. And why can't you measure, with that technology at the station where they get rid of their food? So, and I'm sure there's somebody that's working on it that, is a lot smarter than I am to figure that out. But it's interesting how you can put, something from somewhere else into what you're trying to solve.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, we're working with MetaFood X. They're an AI company, uh,
Yeah, know them
and
well.
yeah, they're working. We're working with them and on we've got a unit or two in our spaces and their technology sort of does what you were talking about. They use the
Yeah,
camera and the AI to take the picture and demonstrate what's going out and then what's coming back and really to help you with the waste, but also with production in the future, so you could reduce or change your production. So I think those types of technologies, if they can be fully integrated in the system, right, from not only from the production, but even pre-production from purchasing, right, and sourcing, so all of that is really important. But I mean, we do simple things too, like dumpster dives and weigh the waste events and stuff like that to get
right.
folks aware of what's going on, to help with the awareness and get them involved and see what really is happening. And because a lot of times it's the students are wasting, they're taking more food than they need to take. And we've done in higher ed in general, they've done a nice job uh, transitioning away from massive amounts of waste. Back in the day when we had trays,
Yep.
all the schools went trayless. This has been, I mean, 20 years ago. I think that we started the trayless thing. And now we also do a lot of portioning, and if somebody wants a larger portion, we'll give it to them, but our ideal is not to, and they can come back if they want more, but 9 out of 10 times they've get enough. And if we gave them more, they would end up throwing that away, and we don't want that.
Yeah. Yeah, you're hitting some key points too for me is that when you guys decided to get rid of trays, that was something that then we had to do in the B&I sector,
Yeah.
right? Is to get rid of the trays. So thanks a lot for that. Yeah.
Yeah, well, by the way, it's not not as productive in B&I because I remember when I was in Des Moines, Iowa at the Principal Financial, and the staff they wanted their tray so they could put more stuff on there, especially in the retail
Yeah.
venues. You want them to have a tray so they can put more stuff on there because they're going to be paying for
I was all over
it.
that, but you have the other people that are standing there saying, wait, you're taking too much food, you're gonna waste it, all the
Yeah, I
things
know.
again you have dealt with. You brought up procurement and supply chain and that sort of thing. And I was when I was interviewing Damian Monticello, he brought up something that this Agora team was kind of talking about was this maybe this hub of some sort where a operator can go in and find a supplier without having to go through the Aramarks and the Sodexos and the Compasses of the world. Maybe talk a little bit about that and what your thoughts are around that.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, we want to be a resource for folks to tap into, and you know, there's a lot of operations out there, and I mean, Syracuse and USC were both self-op, and this is contracted. And it's 50-50-ish out there, like the self-op to contracted accounts, particularly in higher ed. Um, so the contracted folks and then the folks that are associated with a GPO, group purchasing organization, they have the advantage of the procurement folks behind the scenes,
Yeah.
finding the right stuff at good prices, and hopefully if they're sustainable or whatever, whatever parameters are placed around that. But folks that don't have access to that are limited, and they're flying blind, and so our goal is, with this, portal, is for folks to be able to go in there and find those vendors and those products and so on, so that they can align, and they don't have to do all the work. Because it's not that people don't want to be more sustainable. Sometimes they don't have the time, sometimes they don't have the money, or sometimes they don't have the awareness or the ability to get to it. If we can, remove those barriers, we're more than likely to have success or more success on a more consistent basis in regards to, impacting and influencing, folks' behavior, which, it happens, then, in the workplace or in higher ed at the school. It'll hopefully happen when they're out and about, hopefully when they're at home, and then hopefully eventually when they end up in, another sector, whether it's B&I or healthcare or, wherever, travel and leisure, then they'll also, implement that there and continue that.
Well, and in a sense, what you're saying is from the operator side, but there's also the manufacturer side. So,
Oh,
we were
yeah.
big into, supporting local and all those vendors are usually small. They're not big enough to get into the buying organizations. And so like I'm getting ready to go to the NRA show, and the first place I go is way in the back where the cheap seats are. Because that's where the new
Yeah.
stuff is coming, right? And so to me, it gives them an opportunity to potentially get with the operator like yourself to be able to see the latest and greatest. And there's risk. I mean, they're starting to, a company, a small startup, and there's a lot of risk with that. But MetaFoodX is a classic example. They've taken some technology and now they're making it grow. And to me, that's kind of the value of what you guys are doing regarding the local supplier as well, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I mean, one of the conversations that Damien and I had with Jim Green was all around this. How do we provide access for those smaller, vendors, providers, manufacturers to be able to, share what they have and have the opportunity to, play in an environment where they're not a multinational billion-dollar company,
Right.
right? They're a mom and pop. And, we've done something at BU. We incorporated a local and minority women owned business spend into our re- expectation, or from Aramark as well, or so they're able to purchase outside of their traditional, pick list, and purchase local, sustainable, items, um, and hopefully help, across the board. So sometimes it requires, like where if you're a contracted account for the client to, specify this is what we need, this is important to us, and we understand that it may cost a little bit more.
Yep.
Um, but it's important to us. And that's where people struggle, right? It's you put your money where your mouth is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, totally get it. Um, well, okay, so let's switch gears a little bit and maybe just talk a little bit about, your perspective on, um, on the future and kind of where this whole thing is going. I mean, again, what in your mind, what do you see, and what's the next thing with regard to, well, sustainability maybe, but anything. I mean, and I'll throw some teasers out there. I mean, I got big into growing our own food and putting up farms and that sort of thing. And then now they're starting to creep in this cultivated meat thing, which again is a huge sustainability piece. But what's on your radar? What's coming down the pike that we should be aware of?
It's funny, all of those, and it's funny, by the way, Mark, some of that stuff's been around for a long time, right? I mean, back in the day, we were one of the founding members of MCURC at USC. And I remember we went to Napa Valley, and there was two conferences combined. It was MCURC, and I forget what the other one was, at the CIA. And they had those meats there, and they had all kinds of other things, and that was 15, 16 years ago, or something
Yeah.
like that, and that stuff was out around then. It's just the mass adoption or acceptance or appreciation of those things as they go out. But I mean, you mentioned the farming and all of that, and it's more and more difficult, for some folks and campuses. I'll talk about campuses because I'm in higher ed, to do that. There's the when I was at USC, we did the hydroponic towers.
Yep.
We had a hydroponic garden we started with 20 towers, we ended up with 110 towers eventually, and we used those to produce leafy greens and herbs and so
Yeah.
on for our restaurants, and a little bit for the dining hall. But I mean, the amount of volume that you put through a dining hall, those towers couldn't keep up with. So we used the herbs, but the greens and all that were used in the restaurants that we had. But I see, the continuation of those types of opportunities, Mark, really need to exist. But I think the bigger piece is, getting vendors or manufacturers to work together, big and small, in a more symbiotic, meaningful way, um, because and the competitive nature I appreciate, right? They're in there for the most part. You go into business to make money.
Yeah.
um, and so you've got to find a way to continue to make money, but you're also looking at making a difference, or at least that would be my preference. I guess, it's altruistic, but if you can make a difference or help others, you're going to end up making money. It's, focusing on the end as opposed, focus on the mean as opposed to the end, making sure that the things that you're doing, create that value that you're looking for, but really focusing on the things that you're doing. But I think, really bringing together the bigger and the smaller players, on the manufacturer side, and then also on our end too, on the operator side. I see there's so much value for these folks and groups to get together and really talk about what needs to happen, and where the barriers are, and talking about how we can remove or eliminate those barriers. That's the most important piece to me, Mark, is getting everybody together and to start talking and having those conversations and saying, you know what, you're right, but what's really important is this, because this affects this and this affects this. And so your idea won't ever really come to fruition unless we deal with these barriers or roadblocks or pinch points, as you would call them. So I really do think it's getting more and more folks together to talk about it from the different areas and spaces. And that's why I think Agora is fantastic, as we do cover the five different areas.
Yeah.
um, and we're talking about these things, and we're going to add manufacturers to the conversation, because we see the value of that and the importance of that. So I guess that's some of the things that I see.
Yeah, no question about it. When you bring people together, you can solve problems, faster and faster, right? Hopefully. And again, I spent a lot of time with Jim Green at IFMA, we were having these same conversations,
Yep.
right? Is how do we break down the miscommunication or the non-communication? Like I said, I go to NRA, I see something, and my contractor would look at me and say, well, we can't get that into our buying group. And well, okay, so what? Kind of thing. And so it's just breaking down those barriers, right? It's going to come through discussions. I mean, again, one of the IFMA things that I was at, we sat at a table and said to a candy wrapper manufacturer, why can't we're trying to get rid of plastic, and why can't you put it into something else? And they kind of get deer in the headlights. And, it's like, well, all of our machines are set up to run these, and it's like, yeah, they are. But where's the change, kind of. So it's those little things, and, like you say, disruptors like yourself that hopefully change the world in those kinds of ways, right?
Yeah, that's the goal. I mean, that is the goal for us to start making a little bit of a difference every day.
Well, and you don't do it alone in your group. I mean, what do you do to keep your team motivated and yourself motivated?
Mark, I've been here for a couple of years now, and I've spent a lot of time implementing a lot of the things that I've learned over the years, and based on successes and failures, right, of my own, and what I've seen of others. And I think, early on when I was a young leader, I was, one is I was a Marine, so I was command and control, right? Do the way that these things this way. And I'm very anal, or I was very anal, and uptight would be another word that people would use for me. Um, and then I started to dabble into leadership stuff. And when I was in Colorado, my commutes were typically an hour each way, so I started listening to books. And then I started wanting to be like the people that wrote the books. Then over time, I'm like, well, I can't be like them, but I can apply the lessons learned, and so on. And so, that took me a little. I'm a slow learner. It took me a little bit longer than it probably should have, but I've gotten to a place where now I'm spending the time, being, my true authentic leadership self, I believe, and
Good.
really bringing an environment where people feel comfortable being their authentic selves. I spent the first year basically getting to know the team, and making it comfortable for them to, ask questions, make suggestions, and it was a different environment, when I had first gotten here. To bring the team together, we did 360s. We reconfigured our mission, vision, and values. and we have regular meetings and cadences like that that we hadn't had before, really trying to bring about a sense of community and well-being within the group and the teams, which is really translated into they're rolling that down to the next level and to the next level. And so you've got folks, back to what we talked about earlier with the communication, people are communicating. And within, I don't only, I do not only oversee dining, but also all of auxiliaries. So housing, the bookstore, the arena, parking, transportation, fitness and recreation, events and conferences, and a few other areas. So getting them all to work together, and one is universities and higher ed are semi-siloed already anyways, but it's really frustrating when the silos exist within your little own area of oversight or operations. And so I've spent a lot of time breaking down those and getting everybody to work together and really see each other. And we did a number of really cool things to get folks to see each other as humans, and as not just another manager or leader or what a number. And so that's really what I spent almost the first 2 years on, is building team and community. And at the same time we had other initiatives going on, right? But the priority and the focus was really that, to encourage and engage the teams so that they can do what they need to do, and they're the ones that are bubbling things up to me. And now fast forward, we're in the middle of this budget crisis,
Yeah.
Washington imposed budget crisis in higher ed in particular, because we've got the target on our back. And so the team's coming to me with ideas and solutions, and they're not waiting for me to tell them what to do. They're coming to me and saying, hey, let's do this, let's do that. And they're not even asking, how much do you want us to cut? But here's our ideas and suggestions depending on how deep or nuclear you want to go, so that we can really take advantage of what we do well and what we don't really do well, or what we don't think we need to do anymore. So it's been really
Yeah.
cool.
Well, yeah, and I was on a podcast actually late last week, and it was about generations. And there's multiple generations, I'm sure, on your leadership team and your team in general, and um, they don't always think the same, and I guess how did you work in this kind of generational aspect of what was going on? And it sounds like it was a success because, like you say, they're coming to you now with the answers instead of you having to kind of wait or propose the questions. So how do you work with the generations?
Mark, great question. I mean, that's never going to go away. The generations are always going to be there, and I think and it's a lovely thing, because everybody, I think the fact that you've got folks with different lenses, looking at things differently is a blessing, not a curse, as long as you're open to that. It was interesting. Last year, I introduced a book to my team, and you're a compass guy too. We did a lot of disc, and I was disc, everything, because with SAG. Um, but there's a book out there called Surrounded by Idiots, um, and it's all about the four different disc letters and colors, and how people perceive or misperceive people that are different than them as either
Yeah.
difficult or ignorant or lazy or whatever the case may be. And so the goal, and to answer your question, is really to get people to see each other as people, and to respect and listen to each other and be open. One of our values that we just came up with, or our updated values, is curiosity, right? Being curious, right? And trying to understand. I mean, I think, in my opinion, curiosity is one of the strongest values out there, because if you're curious, you're like you want to find out. Empathy is going to happen. Diversity is going to happen. All of those different values that people hold high in high regard are going to be there because you're curious and not judgmental of others. And I think that's something that we've done really well in regards to getting folks to be curious, asking questions, and acknowledging and accepting that others are different, and that's okay. And that's the part that, and so that crosses all generations. I mean, we can be 20 generations in, and that's still gonna be valid, as opposed to trying to focus on the difference between the generations.
Oh, I think that word curious, it has a lot of benefit, like you're using it in the generational conversation, but even them coming to you with ideas, they're curious about, okay, how can we deal with this problem, whatever it is, whether it's Washington or something else. It's like their minds are focused on, trying to figure things out as opposed to fighting it. And we're going to make a stand and we can't do all that kind of stuff. So I love that. I really really love that. So um, okay, we're getting towards the end here. I got some what I'm calling one word lightning round questions for you. And then one other question at the very end that's have it has to do with food service. I know you have a broad spectrum of things, but I'll focus in on food. So jazz or rock and roll?
Rock and roll.
Hmm. Do you have a favorite band?
I'm an 80s guy, although, this is something that's also not on my LinkedIn profile, but I like EDM. So,
Okay.
and I like country western too, but out of the two choices that you gave me, rock and roll. But I mean, I'm more of an like, I like Journey and Foreigner and Cheap Trick, you
Yeah.
know, all those guys and gals from back then. Really love my 80s and, 90s maybe. But and then, like I said, I'll do the country, and then I love the EDM just because of the energy that it comes from it for me.
Domestic travel or international travel?
I love international travel, especially being in Boston. I'm so close to Europe. I
You
mean,
go
it
quite a
takes me
bit.
just as long to fly to California as it does to Europe.
Yeah, well, I'm in Seattle. It takes me forever to get to Europe, just
Yeah.
so you know. Sweet or savory?
Ah, savory.
Ah, okay. Ribs or sushi?
Oh, I love ribs. I love good barbecue all day long.
Winter or summer?
Oh, I love the summer. I picked the wrong. I mean, I moved from LA to
Yep.
Syracuse, and then people are like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Oh, it's global warming." And then and then Boston's a nicer climate than Syracuse is obviously, but I still do miss the warmth and and I love the warm weather and the. But I go to California once a month to see my parents, so that I get my warmth in.
Yeah, that's good. My son lives in Los Angeles, and he grew up in Corvallis, Oregon, where it poured down rain all the time. And
Uh,
he's like, yeah, Dad, it's sunny here all the
yeah,
time. I
I
love
know.
it, kind of thing. So,
Yeah.
logic or emotion?
Wow. That's a tough one. I mean, Mark, I would say emotion these days. It used to be logic, and now I would go more with emotion.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
Okay, so
following
my
the
last,
heart,
what's that?
following the heart, right? The heart emotion.
Yep, definitely. Okay, I got one last question. If you were a piece of kitchen equipment, what would you be and why?
Wow. It's funny. I was just in my kitchen last night cooking up a storm with my Instapot. Um, And yeah, I'd love to be an Instapot because that's like
Yeah.
that does everything, I mean, obviously that's not, I mean, commercial, right? Combi, or one of those ovens, but household, I would probably say an Instapot or something like that can do a lot of different things. Yeah,
So a combi oven, again, related to you, you like to do a lot of different things and always stay in motion, and you have sensors, and people like engaging with the machine or whatever. So that's great. That's
yeah,
great.
and you got cool ringtones and stuff like that. And yeah,
Well, very well. Well, Kris, this has been awesome. I appreciate it. It's just fantastic to hear your story, and
thank you.
we'll definitely look forward to hearing your story when we get to the explosions meeting in a week or so, and it'll be just awesome. So thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.